Hey y'all, this is Southern Woods here. Welcome back to another video. The other morning I was walking into my hunting spot and had a stare down with an owl. And I started thinking about owls during my hunt and other nocturnal creatures, and then the hypothetical situation crossed my mind. What would happen if certain nocturnal animals suddenly became creatures of the day, diurnal? What sort of effects would it have on specific species and the ecosystem as a whole? So I was hypothesizing that day and then decided I'm actually going to do research on this, especially since I found out not really anyone has a video on this hypothetical situation. And obviously, if you're watching this video, you want to know for yourself just as much as I do. So let's get started with an overarching question. What if every nocturnal species suddenly became diurnal? What sort of effects would that have? The simple answer is ecological disaster. You would have overlapping competition, a shift in predator-prey dynamics, increasing runnings with humans, of course, lack of time to adapt. All right, if it was an overnight switch, you would end up seeing many species at least getting very close to dying out, if not going extinct. And of course, as is many times with the ecosystem, when one species goes, it's usually a cascading effect affecting the whole ecosystem as a whole. So the short answer is not good things would happen if every species became creatures of the day. So let's focus on specific examples. I have 8 for y'all today of nocturnal creatures becoming creatures of the daytime. The first one I want to go over is probably the most popular nocturnal species outside of maybe owls, and that is bats. What would happen if bats turned to the day instead of the night? For one, bats are much less agile than other birds, becoming easy prey for hawks and falcons. Good for hawks and falcons and other birds of prey. Bad for bats. You would see a pretty sharp decrease in their population from that alone. You would also see a shift in their diet from moths and mosquitoes to, let's say, butterflies, other flies, daytime beetles. I don't think that would have a huge effect on the bats themselves. I think they could adapt to this fairly quickly. However, I do see mosquito populations shooting up with the lack of bats, because bats are one of the top predators of mosquitoes. So of course this could have an impact on humans as mosquitoes spread diseases like malaria. You would see a lot harder time for humans controlling the mosquito populations. You could see an increase of use of pesticides and smoggers and all sorts of other stuff like that. There would be much more competition with other daytime birds like swallows, as bats and those other songbirds and whatnot compete for daytime insects. One of the big roles bats have in the ecosystem is they are nighttime pollinators, and they help nighttime blooming plants such as agave. Without bats, you could see a sharp decrease in such plants, and with a decrease in agave production, you see tequila production go down. So you could see the price of tequila go up, which for some people who prefer that type of alcohol, that could affect them greatly, of course. Bats also spread tropical fruit seeds like mango and figs, so that could affect their natural production. So tropical fruits could see a small decrease due to bats being during the day as well. Owls would lose a prime piece of their diet as they prey on bats, so you'll see them going much more for rodents and rabbits, and it could have an effect on the overall owl population as well. So with bats, you would see much more disease outbreak, a lot more mosquitoes, some loss of crops such as agave, and increased competition with other songbirds, and increased predation from birds of prey. All right. And you're going to see similar outcomes with other species as well, and some similarities, so I'll try not to be monotonous. The next one I want to talk about is the aforementioned owls. What would happen if owls turned from the dark to the light? Well, for one, they would clash with other birds of prey, like hawks and falcons and eagles, as they have a harder time hunting during the day than at night. They have nighttime camouflage, so they'd be more easily spotted during the day. They'd have to rely more on their stealth and being very, very quiet flyers. So you would see owls during the day much easier. They'd have a hard time protecting their nests from daytime predators such as snakes and other mammals who could easily get into the nest without the owls guarding them during the day. Owls control nocturnal rodents such as rats and rabbits, so you could see a huge increase of overrun crops, diseases being spread from the nocturnal rodents and rabbits. So that's not too good. However, prey like songbirds and squirrels would have to become a big part of the owls' diets during the day. So you could see a lot more managed squirrel population, hopefully. And sadly, for some songbirds, it may not be too good on them. What else? Prey like bats and other insects could overpopulate without owls being their top predator. So that could be good for certain bat populations in North America that aren't doing well. But in South America, where they thrive, you could see a huge boom, much more crowded caves of bats, right? And you could also see a lot more conflict between hawks and falcons and owls. You could get some cool clips to post on YouTube of them fighting mid-air or something like that. So owls overall, they definitely could have a hard time adapting, and I think there's a lot of factors that could change in the ecosystem, right? A lot to be thrown off as we went over. Let's shift our focus now to a different example, becoming... What do y'all think? What am I going to say next? I'm going for mammals. We're looking at raccoons. Raccoons, all right, often have nocturnal behavior. You could sometimes catch them in the day, but they like to roam at night. So what would happen if they were only going around during the daytime? Well, they would be prey for hawks and eagles, reducing their survival rates, all right? They kind of stick out, especially to birds of prey like that. There would be some more competition between other animals for fruit and carrion and other foraging type of foods that raccoons tend to go for. All right, they'd be competing with, let's say, turkey vultures and whatnot during the day, as well as crows and foxes, other opportunistic scavengers. So reducing the food availability overall. Raccoons, believe it or not, do prey on insects and rodents and frogs. They eat meat just as much as they eat fruit and pizza. So you could see a small uptick in the frog, insect, and rodent population at night. Let's see. There would also be more competition for fish and amphibians in wetland environments where raccoons are. All right, so let's say the Everglades or southeast United States, raccoons would be fishing just as much as we are from the banks, right, during the day. Raccoons, of course, would be a lot more visible, all right, in urban settings. We'd be seeing them just as much as squirrels, most likely. They may become even more bolder than they are at night, so you could see them getting hit by cars more, getting shot with pellet guns from dumb kids. And, of course, there would be a slight risk of disease transmission through humans and pets if we have more encounters with raccoons. You'll also see birds, reptiles, and other daytime prey facing greater pressure while nocturnal prey thrives, right? Raccoons preying on eggs and chicks from bird nests or snake dens would become an increasing phenomenon, which could hurt their populations. So overall, I think there would be some ecological shifts, but if anything, raccoons are probably one of the most adaptable that we're going to talk about. I don't think raccoons are going to hurt that much, but there may be some smaller ecological factors that hurt the ecosystem overall. So let's look at another flying, going back to something with wings. Let's talk about moths, right? Moths are nocturnal pollinators and prey, so them going to the daylight would have, honestly, really bad repercussions. For one, moths would struggle to compete with daytime pollinators like bees and butterflies, right? There's already enough competition with them as it is. Add moths to the mix, they would struggle. All right, their dull colors make them easy targets for daytime predators like birds and lizards, and I think you would see a very quick and sharp population decline from that specifically. All right, bright colored insects show other predators that they're toxic and whatnot. Moths don't have that really, so they become easy prey. All right, moths also use the moonlight to navigate, so the daytime would disrupt their navigation very much, reducing their survival rates very greatly. Night blooming plants like yucca and jasmine rely on moths, so you would see a big time decline in those plant populations without moths spreading the pollen. Animals like bats and owls rely on moths, as we've mentioned a couple times, so they would face food shortages and risk pretty big population declines themselves, because moths, again, are one of the top prey for owls and bats. Birds of the daytime, all right, those songbirds and whatnot, they would have a feast. You could see a small increase of population and competition for those delicious moths. All right, another big thing that would impact the economy and the agriculture is moth larvae. All right, pests might worsen if predators like bats decline, and you could see, what the hell am I talking about? I lost my spot. What I'm trying to say is it would hurt agriculture, especially of nighttime crops, is what I'm trying to say. So you'd see the biggest changes overall in the ecosystem being the pollination aspect, and bats and owls probably having more hurt stomachs as they starve a little bit, possibly. But for moths themselves, I think they're going to have a hard time adapting, especially if the shift is overnight. I think you would see a huge decrease in their populations and some species dying out. Let's go from one insect to another. Let's talk about fireflies, lightning bugs, known for their bioluminescence and known for being nocturnal creatures, because we tend to only see them at night. For one, they would have a hard time because they can't see the bioluminescence, right? They glow at night. That's how they communicate. That's how they find mates. You won't really be able to see that during the day, so this could greatly impact their reproduction rates. Another thing is they'd have a hard time avoiding predators like birds, lizards, and whatnot, because they're easy to see and they're not really bright. However, lightning bugs are very toxic to a lot of predators, so I think there would be a sharp decrease in population initially, but eventually certain birds and lizards would get the hint. These things taste like crap. They make my stomach hurt. So I honestly don't think them being daytime prey would be that big of an issue. However, firefly larvae is very important in controlling slugs and snails, surprisingly. I had no idea about that. So you could see a large increase in snail and slug population, which is very damaging to certain crops and plants. So you could see a lot more pesticides being used against snails and slugs in general as farmers tried to save their plants. Just like moths, there'd be some pollination struggles and some competition with other daytime pollinators like bees and butterflies. One of the biggest things and unique things that would be lost through fireflies becoming diurnal is fireflies are actually a big part of certain niche ecotourism. All right, certain parts of Asia and North America are known for being super beautiful and visited during peak firefly season. You go out to these areas in like the mountains, like North Carolina and other places, and whoa, you see the firefly show. Without them being nocturnal, you're going to lose that. And certain areas that have that big niche ecotourism boost during those periods will no longer see that. So there'd be a loss of a cultural phenomenon as well. So lightning bugs, I think, could adapt. All right, they'd have to adapt in their ways of communication, or else I think they're not going to have a good chance of surviving. But other than that, I think they could find food. All right, I think they could, be fine pollinating themselves, and I don't think they'd have a huge time being prey compared to moths. So I think bottom line, lightning bugs could adapt and survive so long as they figure out how to communicate other than lighting up. But who knows? That's a big ask. Who knows if it's possible? All right. we got three or four more that I want to talk about. Let's continue on the bug theme, but forget the wings. Let's talk about tarantulas. All right, maybe not so many people know tarantulas are primarily nocturnal creatures. All right. So what would happen if they were active during the day? For one, they would be very easy prey for birds and reptiles, hawks, roadrunners, lizards, that sort of thing. Because tarantulas are big, they're easy to spot. They're not necessarily super quick or agile compared to other spiders. Not only that, but for tarantulas, they're cold-blooded. They would have to become active in the sun, all right, increasing the risk of them overheating, especially in arid regions and with ground-dwelling species. So those species of tarantulas in those arid regions would have a lot harder time and could possibly die out very quickly. Another thing is that tarantulas use the cover of darkness to ambush prey. In the daylight, they would have a lot harder time getting prey, and they definitely have to find some other hunting tactics or else they're going to starve. Nocturnal prey like crickets might overpopulate, all right, and other prey that tarantula feast upon. Meanwhile, birds and mammals could thrive with more tarantulas to eat. All right, so good for the daytime predators, but nocturnal predators like owls might lose a part of their diet, although I don't think it would be as impactful as losing something like moths, right? Let's see, what else? Of course, more people would see tarantulas during the day than they would at night, so you're going to see a lot more unnecessary fear and killing of tarantulas, most likely as they encounter humans more. However, this could cause some people to have more interest in tarantulas, and you could see a lot of them being kept as pets more often. Overall, I think tarantulas would definitely have to adapt, become brighter, develop more warning colors, and hunt at cooler times during the day in order to survive. I think out of all these examples so far, they have one of the greatest chances of dying out if they suddenly switch during the daylight. Another one I want to talk about, going back to the mammals, is coyotes. All right, going back to a different apex predator, the coyotes. Well, coyotes are apex predators, sure, and they're also scavengers. But what would happen if they hunt and do their thing mainly during the day? Because they mainly hunt and do their thing at dawn, dusk, and nighttime. So they're, for the most part, nocturnal. Well, for one, the first thing you're going to see is an increased running with humans, especially in urbanized settings. Coyotes are most likely going to become roadkill. All right, they're going to be hunted much more because a lot of people hunt coyotes, and they're going to have a lot more direct conflicts with humans, which is going to suck for them. They'd have to shift their prey to birds, squirrels, and insects instead of other rodents and rabbits that they feast at night. So you'd see a lot more population control on, let's say, squirrels. They do have a hard time with heat, specifically in hot climates like here in the southeast. So they'd have to sort of adapt with that and not get too much heat stress during the day. Rodents and rabbits, of course, can multiply, all right, without the nighttime predation of coyotes. So you're going to see a lot of overgrazing and crop damage due to that, just like we saw with the owls. Animals like raccoons and skunks also might thrive at night without coyotes there as well. So I think the biggest thing with coyotes is just that you're going to see a lot more conflict with humans, all right? That's going to be the biggest thing. But overall, coyotes are, just like raccoons, are very adaptable, and I don't think they're going to have that big of an issue. And I don't think they're going to have that big of an impact on the ecosystem as some other creatures we've talked about. Let's talk about two more, though, real quick before we stop. The next one I want to talk about is frogs. All right, specifically tree frogs. Tree frogs are primarily nocturnal compared to other frog species that hop around during the day. What would happen if tree frogs hopped around during the day themselves? For one, they would become easy prey to birds and snakes. All right, they would go ham on the tree frog population. Not only that, but nocturnal insects would thrive unchecked by tree frogs. So you're going to see a lot of nighttime insects have an increase in population, and daytime insects have a decrease in population, right? Tree frogs would struggle with the heat just as tarantulas do, as well as dehydration and UV exposure. All right, they're going to have a hard time surviving during the day compared to a lot of animals we've talked about. Not only that, but they have to compete with other daytime amphibians that have specialized in daytime hunting and whatnot, like certain species of toads and other frogs. So reduced predation on nocturnal insects, of course, is going to lead to agricultural issues. Same with pollination issues if tree frogs impact bees or butterflies significantly. I don't know if they would. And of course, some nocturnal predators like owls and bats would lose a key food source, but again, not as big as, let's say, moths. So I'm going to say that tree frogs are going to have a very hard time adapting and surviving. They'd have to develop thicker skin quicker, alter their diets and their behaviors, or else they're going to have a hard time surviving for sure. Not only that, but one thing we'd have a hard. I'm hard. I love learning about this so much. I've lost my thought. Let's move on to the last example. As you can tell, I'm not one of these perfect YouTube channels. If I mess up, y'all are going to hear it. Let's talk about crickets lastly. All right, you forgot about the crickets, didn't you? All right, I mentioned them briefly. It was a little foreshadowing. But crickets are going to stay out the shadows this time around. They're daytime insects. What would happen? Well, for one, daytime birds and lizards, of course, like we've seen before, would thrive, all right, decimating cricket populations. Crickets, just like tarantulas and tree frogs, struggle with daytime heat and could lead to dehydration, forcing crickets into less ideal situations. And since crickets have their mating calls that they'd have to do at daytime now, you would see predators being alert to their location much more. And just like we have issues with the cicadas screaming in the summer, let's add crickets chirping all day as well. And let's just have the tree frogs ribbit all day as well. And want to shoot ourselves possibly, depending on how much noise they make. So, the disrupted mating for crickets during the day due to what they have to do with the noise. You're going to see daytime predators gain a new food source, as I mentioned, and nocturnal predators like bats and spiders lose major prey, and I think this would have a big impact on nighttime predators just as moths would. Increased cricket activity during the day could also harm plants, all right, as they start feasting on daytime plants. So that's just another pest to deal with. And crickets will have to compete with daytime insects like grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are like day crickets, so they're going to have competition with them. All right, whoever does better is going to do good, and whichever one does worse is going to die off. But lastly, the last impact I'm going to say they have, all right, outside noise pollution on humans, is a lot of farmers and whatnot use crickets a part of feed for like chicken and other animals. So crickets are used for feed for chickens and pets like lizards and fishing bait. So with a big decrease in cricket population from shifting to the daylight, you're going to see a sharp rise in the price of crickets overall. So you may want to switch your baits back to night crawlers, right? Speaking of, are night crawlers nocturnal? May have to do a separate video on that. But overall, that's what I wanted to talk about. We went over 8 specific examples of nocturnal species going into the day. Some have really, really big impacts on the ecosystem that could cascade. Others, there would be impacts on the ecosystem, but not as big. They most likely leave holes rather than complete chaos. I think raccoons and coyotes would, and maybe bats would probably have the biggest advantages and availability to adapt to their daytime lifestyles, while tarantulas, crickets, and tree frogs, we could see extinction on the horizon. But again, a lot of this is just hypothesizing with some research to back it up. It's hard to tell exactly what would specifically happen, and unless something happens thousands of years from now, bats and owls are going to stay nighttime creatures. But hopefully this interested y'all. This I don't do these informational type of videos that often. Only if I really have the urge to do it, and I'm not perfect with my scripts and I mess up and whatnot, as y'all heard. But hopefully you liked it enough to leave that like button and subscribe and join the Southern Woods community, because I mainly do outdoor related videos, food related videos, all sorts of things. But maybe I'll do more informational stuff like this. And without further ado, go hang out with the nocturnal creatures and hope they don't turn to the light. Without further ado, again, because I'm repeating myself, Southern Woods out.